Welcome back. All right, so today's team history video is on the Carolina Hurricanes, and it does include the Hartford Whalers. So the all-time leading scorers, it's Hartford and Carolina combined. The move from Hartford to Carolina, honestly, the amount of crossover between players that were in Hartford became well known in Carolina as well, pretty strong. So the fact that Ron Francis is number one on the board makes a lot of sense. Ends up with 1,186 games combined between his time in Carolina and Hartford. 382 goals, 793 assists, 1,175 points. Of course, Francis now the general manager in Seattle. He had a run as the general manager in Carolina, could not get them over the hump into the playoffs, and so he remains a hero. I mean, he honestly had an amazing career. Some Stanley Cup rings to his name as well. Eric Stahl, number two on the board, 909 games played, 322 goals, 453 assists, 775 points. Kevin Dineen, who straddles that line of both Whaler and Hurricane, 708 games played, 250 goals, 294 assists, 544 points. Rod Brindamore, 694 games played, 174 goals, 299 assists, 473 points. Jeff O'Neill, 673 games played by O'Neill, 198 goals, 218 assists, 416 points. And then Pat Verbeek, which of course is a Whaler, 433 games, 192 goals, 211 assists, 403 points. So it's interesting because Francis is a GM, Verbeek's a GM, Brindamore's now the coach of Carolina. Some pretty smart guys playing for the Carolina Hurricanes and for Whalers. Sebastian Aho, 445 games played with Carolina thus far, 182 goals, 219 assists, 401 points. This season, he should easily get up past, I would think, Brindamore. That's 72 points to tie Brindamore, 73 points to pass him, as long as he can stay healthy. Aho should get that done. Then you have Skinner, 8th on the board, 579 games played, 204 goals, 175 assists, 379 points. Blaine Stoughton, 357 games played with the Whalers, 219 goals, 158 assists, 377 points. And Jeff Sanderson comes in at 10th, 479 games played, 196 goals, 173 assists, 369 points. Believe he was both a Whaler and a Hurricane as well. Now, when you get into wins leaders, well, Cam Ward has that, and he's going to have that for a long time. 318 wins. Urbe 130, Mike Liut 115, Sean Burke 107, Peter Sidorkiewicz has 71. So yeah, a lot of wins there, and Ward's gonna be first for quite some time. I don't think there's any chance of anybody winning say 100 games this season for Carolina. They're good, but there's a limit to how many games you can win in a season. Retired numbers is where things get a little bit touchy and a little bit dicey. And if you're if you're Jack Edwards in Boston, the Hartford throwback jersey is going to be worn in a game against Boston. So look for him to get mad about the numbers that have been unretired. The Whalers retired number 2, which was Rick Lee, number 19, which is John McKenzie, and number 9, which is Gordie Howe. Now the Hurricanes also retired number 2. They retired it for Glenn Wesley. Retired number 10 for Ron Francis, and number 17 for Rod Brindamore. They've also honored Steve Chason's number 3. He was in a car crash in 1989 and passed away, so they immediately honored his number. I don't think anybody's worn it since then. The number 9 of Gordie Howe is in all basically retired. It's just they don't have the banner up there. And Josef Vasicek, who was in the locomotive plane crash, his number 63 is honored by them as well. So no actual banner up in the rafters for those 3, but I'm pretty sure nobody's going to be wearing those numbers anytime soon. So when it comes to playoffs, well, for Carolina, playoffs, yeah, it's been a challenge. They've only made the playoffs 9 times in their entire time in the National Hockey League. 2001 was the second time they made it to the playoffs, the first time since 2000. They lost in the first round in 6 against the New Jersey Devils. In 2002, the first time they'd been in the playoffs in back-to-back seasons, they lost in the final. Got all the way to the final and lost against Detroit in 5. Then in 2006, after a year off due to the lockout, they win the Stanley Cup. The first Stanley Cup of the salary cap era goes to the Carolina Hurricanes in a battle against Edmonton that nobody saw coming. 2009 was their next time to the playoffs. They go all the way to the conference final where they got swept by Pittsburgh. They don't make the playoffs again until 2019 where they again go to the conference final. So feast or famine with Carolina to this point in their existence. They lost in the conference final in 4 straight against Boston. Then they make the playoffs in back-to-back seasons for only the second time in their existence as the Carolina Hurricanes. They lost in the first round against Boston in 5. That's after they won the qualifying round against the Rangers. 2021, they lose in the second round against Tampa Bay. That was in 5. And this past season, they lost in the second round against the New York Rangers. That happening in 7. So they've made the playoffs 4 straight years. I haven't seen anybody saying they're going to fall out of the playoffs this coming season because they really shouldn't. And so it's been a remarkable run for Carolina. They're relevant for the first time. They've got an owner that seems to be, he has some different ideas, but he seems to be geared into the idea that if you have a winning product on the ice, the fans will show up. Their Stanley Cup years, of course, 2006, the only time that they've won the Stanley Cup. Their arena is PNC Arena. It's been the same arena since 2000. The name will change as your sponsor changes, but it's been their arena for a long time. Their coaching history, 14 coaches in the history of this franchise, starting with Blackburn, who coached the Hartford Whalers coming in. He had a record of 42, 63, and 35. Their current coach, of course, Rod Brindamore, a record of 288, 174, and 28. The first goal scored in the history of this team in Hartford was scored by Gordie Roberts at 14:15 of the third in a 4-1 loss against the Minnesota North Stars. Their most recent goal was scored by Max Domi, a rental at the deadline, at 16:13 of the third period in a 6-2 loss against the Rangers in that Game 7. So ugly loss in the Game 7. Carolina looking to rearm and go for it again next season. Their all-time penalty minutes leader is Kevin Dineen with 1,439. Season records, it's odd these are all Whalers. Almost all Whalers, isn't it? Blaine Stoughton Blaine Stoughton. 56 goals in 79-80. And honestly, a really good goal scorer, but I believe a lot of his career was in the WHA as well. And of course, once they get into the NHL, WHA totals aren't recognized by the National Hockey League. Assists, Francis with 69 assists in 89-90. And they rewarded him for that record by trading him to Pittsburgh. So he had a pretty good run in Pittsburgh too. Their points all time, Mike Rogers still leads with 105. He had that record in 79-80 and 80-81. So they had teams that could score when they came over from the WHA. Penalty minutes, Torrey Robertson with the lead there, 358 penalty minutes. So that one's safe. That's from 85-86. Wins in a season, this is where the Carolina Hurricanes player shows up. It is Cam Ward with 39 in 2008-2009, a year that they ended up going all the way to the conference final and could not win the Stanley Cup or get to the Stanley Cup final because Pittsburgh said no. That was Pittsburgh's year. Their best draft picks, I picked 4 out of the team's history, going back to 1982 for 2 of them. Number 88 that year was Ray Ferraro. Pretty big career, pretty good. And of course, he's now a Rinkside reporter. 1982 at 56th overall, they draft Kevin Dineen. So Kevin Dineen ended up having a very long career in the National Hockey League. And of course, if you redid the 82 draft, he'd go earlier than that. Number 120 in 2012 was Jacob Slavin. So Slavin there, I would say 120 is a pretty good value pick. And then at 188th overall in 1993, they draft Manny Legacy. I liked Legacy. I thought he had a good career, but was it long enough? Probably not. Then their first round picks that played less than 100 games. Not a lot here, really. 1980, Fred Arthur was drafted 8th overall. He ended up playing 80 games in the NHL. 1983, drafting 20th overall, they draft David Jensen. He played 69 games in the NHL. Drafting 11th in 1988, they draft Chris Govidaris. He plays 45 games in the NHL. Drafted 22nd overall in 1997. Nikos Chelios ends up being drafted there. He plays 2 games in the NHL. Number 11 in 1988 was Jeff Hirama. He ends up playing 32 games in the NHL. 15th overall in 2001 was Igor Knyazhov, and he played 0 games in the NHL. Number 27 in 2009 was Philippe Paradis. No games in the NHL for him either. So, at the draft table, it's not really where they ended up making their championship work. There was some good trades, some good moves that were made there. But of course, I've done a video on the channel on their Stanley Cup win, on revisiting the 2006 team. So that's in that Stanley Cup playlist I was finishing off this past week. And so, yeah, the Carolina Hurricanes trying to win that second Stanley Cup. They're going to be in the mix, I would think, for the next 3 to 5 years, but can they get over the hump and win it? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.